I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, U.S. warships remain on standby as diplomats work on a solution to the crisis in Syria.
I'm Peggy Pico. On the anniversary of 9/11, we look at the lessons learned about terrorism and how they may apply to the U.S. response to Syria. Then an investigative report finds donations to veterans charities have soared since 9/11, and so has the number of scams. How to find out where your contribution money is really going.
Many organizations have turned September 11th into a day of service. We'll have the story of one woman who's chosen to serve others after nearly losing her own life.
Has this ever happened to you? Presenting the Clapper.
And remember the Clapper? Automating your home has come a long way since then, but are smart homes safer? We'll have a look. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. UN Security Council is working at this hour on a new resolution to dismantle Syria's chemical weapons. And the Navy is keeping several warships on patrol, including some from San Diego, along the Mediterranean Red Sea as well, ready for possible missile strikes against Syria. And now it's all up to the diplomats. Secretary of State John Kerry getting ready to meet with his Russian counterpart. And the White House is working to pin hopes on Russia for the success of a diplomatic solution. In the meantime, violence is continuing in Syria. Observers from Britain say government warplanes attacked a field hospital, killing 11 and wounding dozens more. Now, many San Diegans are expressing relief over the chance for diplomacy in Syria, but a group of Syrian Americans say they're disappointed. They say they watched President Obama's address last night to the nation closely, listening for a message of hope for their war-torn homeland, but they say what they heard was a big letdown.
That glimpse of hope is gone right now, is gone with Mr. Obama backing down on his first proposal.
The local chapter of the Syrian American Council has been staging rallies around San Diego, demanding military action. San Diego is now home to about 2,500 Syrians. Last night, President Obama outlined reasons the U.S. should be prepared to strike Syria. Peggy Pico and her guests discuss how the U.S. has intervened in the Middle East since 9/11 and what we've learned.
President Obama's speech last night about the U.S. response to Syria addressed concerns about al-Qaeda's role in Syria.
Many of you have asked a broader question. Why should we get involved at all in a place that's so complicated and where, as one person wrote to me, those who come after Assad may be enemies of human rights? It's true that some of Assad's opponents are extremists. But al-Qaeda will only draw strength in a more chaotic Syria if people there see the world doing nothing to prevent innocent civilians from being gassed to death.
As the United States once again considers military intervention in the Middle East, we look at how lessons learned from 9/11 may be applied to Syria. Joining me to discuss the issue are Rick Epps, retired SDSU political science professor with an expertise in terrorism, and Ibrahim Al-Marashi, assistant professor of Middle East history at Cal State San Marcos. Welcome.
Yes,
Ibrahim, how strong is al-Qaeda today compared to what they were like when they attacked the U.S. in 2001?
I'll just use a rough analogy. Just like Starbucks started out as a small cafe in Seattle and then became a global brand, that's what happened to al-Qaeda. Just after the 9/11 attacks, al-Qaeda was confined to Afghanistan. And the attacks pushed it into Pakistan. And from there, the idea of al-Qaeda became a global franchise that took root in North Africa, Yemen, Somalia. And the al-Qaeda he's referring to in his speech is al-Qaeda in Syria. So what was a confined group has now become kind of a Middle Eastern franchise.
With cells that we've heard about kind of all over the world.
Exactly.
Rick, what role does al-Qaeda believed to have when it comes to the civil war in Syria?
Well, this is part of the question that we have. Is we know that they are actively involved in part of the Free Syrian Army, one of the segments of the Free Syrian Army, We know that they're also affiliated and also influencing other militant groups. And as long as you have this chaos, then Al-Qaeda has greater traction to be able to gain more people to its cause, because they are the ones who are providing assistance and money and aid to those who are displaced. And that becomes a bigger problem, seeing the growth of Al-Qaeda in Syria as a result of the chaos that's ensuing at this moment. So you're going to see a continued growth of Al-Qaeda. We don't know exactly how big, but we do know there is a definite influence in this crisis.
Well, Ibrahim, President Obama addressed concerns about unintended consequences of military intervention, including terrorist groups. What have we learned from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars on unintended consequences that may influence what our response should be to Syria?
Well, from the 2001 Afghanistan war, the unintended consequence was that Al-Qaeda became this, group that has now branches throughout the Middle East. The intended consequence was destroy Al-Qaeda. The unintended consequence that made it a global entity with cells around the world, but also with branches that are taking active parts in conflicts, including in Syria.
Do you think, or I should ask you, how has U.S. intelligence changed about weapons of mass destruction, including chemical weapons? How is that different from the intelligence that we had when we went into the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war?
Well, I find interesting this time around is that the Obama administration is making the intelligence it has unavailable to the public. In 2003, we were able to scrutinize the intelligence because Powell made, his argument in front of the UN. He showed the intelligence. He played the intelligence for the world. To this day, we don't know what kind of intelligence is the Obama administration acting upon.
Well, Kerry certainly announced some of that intelligence, and we've seen video reports with sources. So there's a little bit of that visually we can see. But let me ask Rick about this. In a recent interview with a French news organization, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad mentioned the 9/11 attacks and said that if the U.S. attacks Syria, that we should be prepared in this country for retaliation. How big of a threat do you think that really is?
I think it's a pretty bellicose statement, not because of the possibility that it could happen, but it won't happen as a result of what takes place in Syria. What I mean by that is Syria's capability in terms of threat to the United States is fairly minimal. The greater threat would be Al-Qaeda, but again, because Al-Qaeda is so decentralized now. Having said that, it really is just, I think when I look at these things, I kind of chuckle a little bit because this is his way of pontificating, because he's got Russia behind him, so he thinks he can make much more grandiose statements than he really has the teeth to really do. The consequences would then escalate to something he would not ever want to be able to live with. So.
And let me end with that with you, Ibrahim. What do you think of that? Do you think it's a credible threat that maybe engaging in other countries might actually have some impact here?
I don't think it's a credible threat on par with the scale of attacks that happened on 9/11. I think in his terms of retaliation, he might hurt American interests in the Middle East rather than hurting the homeland itself.
All right, Professors Rick Epps and Ibrahim Al-Marashi, thanks so much.
Your pleasure.
The 9/11 attacks were remembered in San Diego and around the nation today. In Chula Vista, a bell was rung at Fire Station 7, built in memory of firefighters killed 12 years ago. This was one of many observances around the county. A bell also rang at the White House this morning at 8:46 Eastern Time, marking the first attack in New York. The president also visited the 9/11 memorial at the Pentagon, saying our hearts still ache for the futures snatched away. Nearly 3,000 people were killed on September 11th, 2001. Many organizations have chosen to turn 9/11 into a day of service, encouraging people to volunteer to help those who need it most. Our story tonight features a woman doing just that after suffering a massive brain stem stroke last year.
You never know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen.
Twice a month, Amy Lee Coulter volunteers at Tri-City Medical Center in Vista as a patient advocate. On this particular day, she's checking on a patient in the orthopedic and spine area.
Is this an okay time to talk?
To make sure he's comfortable, and aware of his surroundings and options. It wasn't long ago Coulter was on the other side as a patient.
It's important to always say goodbye to people, be positive, tell them you love them, because you never know what's going to happen when you get a massage.
Coulter suffered a massive brainstem stroke last year after getting a vigorous massage to her neck. It left her paralyzed for weeks and unable to speak. She could only communicate by blinking.
I was basically a baby. I couldn't talk, swallow well, I drooled, I couldn't feed myself, couldn't take care of my bowel and bladder. It was a mess.
After months in hospital rooms and even a nursing home, she's regained her strength, and at 33 knows what a difference the little things can do to help someone recover.
How's the food? The nurses are so busy, they do so much, and I think it's really helpful to have someone who is not clinical, who's just like, do you need another blanket? How about some chapstick? Are you bored? Do you want a magazine or a movie or whatever it is?
Coulter is one of about 450 patient advocates at Tri-City Hospital. She says volunteering is her therapy.
All right, no problem, thank you.
Every year, auxiliary members or volunteers at the hospital donate more than 78,000 hours. For volunteer opportunities, check out their website, tricitymed.org. One year ago today, 4 Americans were killed in an attack on a U.S. diplomatic mission in Benghazi. The ambassador to Libya and 3 others were killed, including 2 former Navy SEALs from San Diego. Today, North County Congressman Darrell Issa announced a new hearing about the attack. It will feature testimony from an independent review board. Its members say security in Benghazi was inadequate. Now, the Navy says reports of sexual assault have gone up over the past year by about 50%. Navy says it's on pace to end this fiscal year with about 1,100 cases. There were over 700 last year. The Navy says the uptick is a sign more sailors are comfortable with reporting an assault and believe something will be done when they do. The Navy is also worried about budget cuts. Navy Secretary Ray Mabus says cuts could make it harder to be ready for operations such as the possible strike on Syria. He says fewer ships are going to sea, fewer pilots are in the air, and fewer Marines are training, all because of automatic spending cuts expected to slash $500 billion from defense over the next decade. Mabus says if the cuts continue, future military options will be limited. A California charity for veterans has settled an excessive spending lawsuit with the state. Peggy Pico has more on an investigative report about tracking a charity's performance and how to choose the right one.
The Help Hospitalized Veterans charity based near Hemet has been collecting donations for more than 30 years. Now the charity has agreed to pay nearly $2.5 million and ban its leaders from future charity work to settle a lawsuit filed by the state alleging misuse of funds. Here with more on what to ask before donating to a charity is Cheryl Reichert, President and CEO of San Diego's Better Business Bureau. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, Cheryl, a recent investigation report by the Carnegie Knight News 21 journalism program found tens of millions of dollars donated to veterans charities over the last decade have been misused, spent on expensive things like homes and excessive salaries. Aren't there laws that require charities to report their spending?
There are laws that require charities to support some of their financial information to the IRS for purposes of maintaining their tax-exempt status. And their finances are legally to be given to any donor by request at any point in time. So if you're looking at donating money to a charity, asking for their finances is something you should do, and they should be willing to provide for you.
Does the IRS, coming back to that, do they audit these very often? Do they look to see what they're reporting is good?
Unfortunately, there's not a lot of governance and oversight of the charity sector. And in order for the IRS to do an investigation, a trigger is really required. A news report would be a trigger. An employee might report misgivings in an organization. So it's not something that happens very often.
How does the Better Business Bureau here basically rate veterans charities?
Well, we do evaluate charities on criteria different from businesses, and we don't give them an A+ to F scale, but we look at their governance, we look at finances, we look at their fundraising efforts, and we look at the effectiveness of their programs. This requires the charity to provide a lot of information to us in order to be able to give you the information on each of those components. So unfortunately, we've got some charities that are reluctant to provide the information. I'd be concerned about those, but you yourself can go online and look at all of the different areas and how a charity is behaving.
If you go online at the BBB and you look for a charity and it doesn't have information about it, is that a flag?
It would be for me. It doesn't mean that it's a bad charity. It just means that they haven't provided the information. But charities are required by law to provide information to donors upon request.
Okay,
so that's why it becomes a big concern for the BBB. If they're not providing the information to us, we are skeptical and concerned at that point.
Now, I know some of the donated money to charities obviously has to go to overhead, but what's the benchmark on how much should be going to overhead and management, and how much should be going to the actual work of the charity?
Oh, the BBB has set that at 70%. So we don't want to see more than 30% of the expenses going to administrative costs, overhead, fundraising efforts. We want the majority of the dollar going to the actual cause. But some causes require a little more administration than others. And so comparing whoever you're wanting to give to, what the cause is, comparing veterans charities with other veterans charities is a good way to see that your dollar is getting used wisely.
Yeah, and in this investigative report, you could see where the money was being spent. And one in particular, based out of Florida, there was only less than 9% of the actual donated dollar, 9 cents on every dollar, was actually going to what they said they were going to the veterans. Does that surprise you?
No, because unfortunately I was taken advantage of by an illegitimate charity before I worked for the BBB and found out about this space and how many people are operating just flat out illegally in it. And then you have people with good intentions that just aren't experienced enough to run a charity well. So that's why when you're looking at giving your dollar, if you want them to have the majority impact that you can have for your money, you want to compare and see where your dollar's going, because we see that huge range.
So going along with that, what are some of the top few tips if somebody wants to donate to, in this case, a veterans charity? What should they do?
I would absolutely make sure you check them out with a third party, whether it's the BBB, Charity Navigator, GuideStar. Get the information, compare them to like charities, and don't feel pressured. So many people, when they get that phone call or they're at the grocery store in line to give that extra dollar, make sure you know where your money's going, how it's being used. Donations are so important for charities, but give wisely.
All right. And do you get many inquiries that are, as far as people that are concerned over the legitimacy of certain charities?
Well, unfortunately, it's not like when you buy a television set and it breaks in the first week. You often people don't follow up on their money to see that it's being used appropriately. So we get inquiries only in the context of people going online and checking out the report on the website.
Trying to find out information.
Yeah.
Well, I want to let people know that they can see that whole investigative report and the rankings on veterans charities and links to those organizations you just named on our website, kpbs.org.
Excellent.
Better Business Bureau. Cheryl Reichter, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I don't know if you heard about this. City of San Diego could become the largest in California to restrict single-use plastic bags. A council committee is asking staff to actually draft an ordinance by next month. KPBS Business and Environment reporter Eric Anderson joins us with more on the story. Eric, only one city in the county bans plastic bags right now. What is San Diego asking for?
Well, Dwayne, it's pretty straightforward. Councilmember Sherry Leitner is asking for a rule that keeps grocery stores and large retail outlets from putting purchases into disposable plastic bags. Now, the idea is to encourage the use of reusable tote bags, but consumers would be allowed to buy a paper bag for a dime if they forget to bring their own. And there would likely be some exceptions. Nonprofits and restaurants wouldn't be included in the ban. And bags could still be used for produce or for meat items in a grocery store. Now, if San Diego does adopt the rules, it will become the second city in the county to adopt a plastic bag restriction. Solana Beach the first. Encinitas is also working on legislation.
And what seems to be driving this issue locally?
Well, a couple of things, actually. One of them is cost. Band supporters say that it costs the city of San Diego's Environmental Services Department $160,000 a year to clean up the bags. They turn up in the landfill, in parks, bays, and on beaches. And the other reason is that efforts to enact a statewide ban have fallen short so far. The state's grocers do support a statewide ban because they say it would apply the same rules to all stores in California. Lawmakers are widely expected to revisit the issue after the first of the year. Here in San Diego, city staff is expected to have a proposal drafted by next month.
KPBS business and environment reporter Eric Anderson. A new study says wind farms are proving deadly for eagles, with several dozen golden and bald eagles killed in the past 5 years, mostly by colliding with wind turbines. An industry spokesperson says the toll is lower than other causes of eagle deaths. California and Wyoming had the most eagle deaths. Federal officials are investigating some of the causes.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour. Reaction to the president's address on Syria and Hari Srinivasan on New York Mayor Bloomberg's legacy. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
First, it came to our computers, then it was on our phones. These days, the internet seems to be everywhere, connecting everything to everything else. As more of our stuff gets tied into the web, our daily routines are getting easier, but things could also be getting easier for hackers. KPBS technology reporter David Wagner explains.
We humans have dreamed of being able to remote control all the stuff in our homes for a while now. Remember the clapper?
Clap on, clap off. The clapper.
But in the last few years, that dream quickly became a reality. Now that almost anything can be connected to the internet, savvy homeowners can set up their lights, air conditioning, and other appliances to be controlled centrally, often right on their smartphones.
I mean, for me, I'm a geek. I like playing with things.
Joel Griffin Dodd is about to move his family of 3 to a new house in El Cajon. He's planning to outfit their home with all kinds of smart technology. He's doing it for fun, but also to save money.
If I can reduce our home energy bills and make things a bit more convenient around the house, then yeah, great. Let's give it a go.
Like lots of homeowners these days, Dodd wants to use the internet to make his home intuitive, more user-friendly, smarter. But smarter doesn't always mean safer.
More things are coming online, but people are understanding less and less about the technology behind these devices.
That's John Matherly, a San Diego programmer who knows all about just how unsafe this emerging Internet of Things can really be. He built a search engine called Shodan. It's not your typical Google-style search engine. Google searches through all the websites on the internet. But the internet isn't just a collection of websites. It's also a collection of things.
Thermostat, refrigerator, light bulbs, garage doors, sprinklers, front door locks, baby monitors, traffic lights, Japanese toilets, construction vehicles, glucose meters, your TV, almost everything nowadays that you have in your house, except for furniture.
If it's connected to the internet, Shodan finds it, and it finds out how secure those things are. Shodan users have found some pretty shocking things, like the operating system for an entire hydroelectric plant in France.
Shodan has been called the scariest search engine on the internet.
Lucky for us, Shodan is in the hands of a good guy. Matherly uses it to warn people about insecure devices, not to exploit them. But when Matherly took me on a spin through Shodan, I must admit I was a little freaked out.
Let's say you want to find some of these home automation devices.
He pulls up Shodan and types the word Insteon into the search bar.
And what does this device do?
So Insteon creates a device, it's a hub, that you can connect different parts of your house to. So you can connect your sprinkler system, you can connect your garage door, your kitchen lights, everything in your house you can connect to the Insteon hub, and then the Insteon hub lets you manage all of them.
It's basically the command and control center of a house. And Matherly just found one in Oceanside, completely unprotected and publicly accessible on the internet. He clicks on it. He's never asked for a username or password.
Yeah, here you have sprinklers, back, side, front. You can turn them on and off.
So you could actually...
This is a live house.
You could, like, if you clicked on right now, their back sprinklers would turn on.
Yeah, it's completely nuts. I never in my wildest dreams imagined that when I created Shodan, I'd find people's houses on the internet and you can control things.
I asked Matherly what should be done to keep homes like this secure.
Insteon probably should do a better job at communicating to the end users that, no, yes, it's cool, you can do this, but make sure you do it in a safe way.
We typically don't force our customers to any level of security.
That's Joe Data, CEO of Insteon, the Irvine-based company that makes the hub. Data says it's really the older Insteon products that have security issues. Newer hubs require a username and password. Either way, he says it's the customer's responsibility to keep their own home safe.
The internet's a dangerous thing, and we all need to be careful whether it's what we're doing on our time off and putting on Facebook, or if it's the password to your Wi-Fi network.
For people like Joel Griffin Dodd, the home automation enthusiast in El Cajon, security just isn't a huge selling point.
It really isn't something that I lie awake at night worrying about. There's always a risk.
Data says that if consumers start demanding better security, Insteon would happily give it to them. David Wagner, KPBS News.
We've got another warm-up on the way, but this time it'll be a dry heat. Coastal temperatures moving into the mid-80s by this weekend. Mid-90s for the Inland Valley with plenty of sunshine. Low to mid-80s for the mountains and above 100 in the desert. You can find tonight's stories and download the KPBS app, all on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Good night.